This is being billed as the most exciting hydrocarbon well in Central Australia in 5 decades since the Mereenie field was discovered, which is to the west of Alice Springs. It's flowing oil. Australia currently has to import 80% of its fuel oil, and a very exciting discovery, John.
Very, very exciting, Julian. It's been the culmination of 14 years since we started this company. It's been a team effort, but I find it very...
Did you found the company 14 years ago?
That's right, yeah. 1997, wow. Myself and Richard Fall founded this company. Very slow going to begin with, but as the oil price continued to improve, more and more money flowed into the company. Finally, we listed in March 2006, and from there on, it's been some fairly intensive exploration efforts that we've done in Central Australia.
Now, I understand that the oil that you've produced in your first test is a Tapis grade oil. The price of Tapis today would be what, $123 or something like that. When you started out, that long time ago, what was the oil price when you kicked off?
Around about $10 to $12 a barrel.
Goodness.
So we had a long-term view that oil prices were going to improve.
You must have.
But it's fair to say we didn't fully understand how long it was going to take and how slow the process was going to be.
Well, we might talk a little bit later on about some of the other players that are in the field now. I mean, people are talking about quite an extensive wave of interest through the centre of Australia. It's an area that, the size of, the same as the area of Texas, isn't it? And very, very poorly explored.
Well, it's not quite as big as Texas. It's about...
Nothing is, of course.
Nothing is, that's right. It's approaching about half the size of Texas, but it's certainly bigger than the whole of the UK.
Okay, so it's in a very early stage of development, and the news is that this has really far-reaching implications, which we'll drill into a little bit, pardon the pun, but not just for your company, but I think for all of the operators in that field, right?
Sure. Well, basically there are not too many other operators because we started early. We've put together most of the acreage. For example, in the Amadeus Basin, I think there's 1 or 2 other small companies have 1 or 2 permits, but we've certainly got the rest. In Central Australia, generally...
You've got a really major holding in Central Petroleum. What's the total area?
Around about 70 million acres or 260,000 square kilometres.
260,000 square kilometres?
That's correct.
That's a huge chunk of turf. So and the implication is from this discovery that you've got a very extensive holdings around the Surprise well.
That's right.
Been completed.
Well, look, you know, the whole area has been very lightly explored. In fact, 2 major oil and gas discoveries were made in the mid-1960s. That is the Mereenie and the Palm Valley oil and gas fields.
Which supply Alice Springs today, right?
Yes, the Palm Valley and Mereenie fields are still providing gas to Alice Springs. Up until a year or so ago, they were pumping gas up a pipeline for the Power and Water Authority in Darwin, around about 25 petajoules a year. But this whole area has a well density of less than 1 well every 1.2 million acres. So it's very, very underexplored. And yet 2 major discoveries were made without virtually any seismic, that is Mereenie and Palm Valley in the 1960s. Such is the remoteness of the area, though, that both of those fields didn't come on stream until the mid-1980s when appropriate infrastructure had been constructed.
Well, we'll talk a little more about marketing as we go, selling product, but just a little bit more about the well. Were you there? What's the country like? Camels and...
Well, the whole of Central Australia is pretty much red dirt, blue sky red dirt, and yes, there are camels and dingoes running around the place, and it's very sparsely populated.
And green at the moment, right?
It's quite green at the moment, yeah. There's been some fairly heavy rainfalls in the district.
There? And
I wasn't out there for the whole drilling of the well, and I do have to run a company, and it's becoming increasingly complex. But myself and the chairman did travel up there for the actual flow test of this well. This discovery is very, very significant. We think we've got approximately somewhere between 6 to 10 million barrels of oil in place, but it's early days. Yep. That individual closure is on the end of a long structure that comes down into the oil kitchen. And up dip it terminates against a salt dome. So if that greater structure is fully charged, and we don't know that yet, we don't have near enough information to say that, but the volumetrics are such that if that full structure is fully charged, we may be talking about 100 million barrels of oil in place in that particular structure. But more significantly than that, surrounding the 2 oil kitchens we've delineated up there, we have salt intrusions to the north, salt intrusions to the east, salt intrusions to the south. So in theory,
the oil kitchen is where the sediments have generated oil. Is that?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay, and there's a trap that hovers in space above the, in the geology, above the sort of area of genesis of the oil. Am I right?
Well, that's right. Basically, you've got several layers, and we're talking about basically the Horn Valley siltstone as being the source rock for this area. The Horn Valley siltstone. Over the top of that, we've got a sandstone body called the Stairway Sandstone, and then finally over the top of that, we've got the Stokes, which is a great seal. These are Ordovician. Don't quote me, a couple of 100 million years.
So these are quite old rocks on world scales.
That's right.
I guess you're pioneering the geology out there as well. I mean, a salt dome is a trap site that you're going to go out and examine. In doing my homework, I noticed you've only used 2D seismic, so a fairly approximate method for doing your initial targeting.
Sure.
And you're debating now?
Oh, there's no debate. Look, absolutely, with an oil discovery of this significance, we have to do 3D seismic sometime in the future. There's no question.
Okay.
A bigger company approach would have been to do 3D seismic to begin with, but of course we've got such a huge acreage package, we can't afford to do that. But after we make each discovery, of course, the plan is basically to continue with the field development, and we will be doing some 3D seismic along the way for sure.
Okay, but the temptation must be great to just fire another hole into the same formation, because you've for a start, it's barely an exploration hole, let alone a production hole.
No, that's right.
I mean, you've got there, right?
Were we to drill another well close by, I think the chances of finding oil and getting it to flow are remarkably high. Such a well would probably be the lowest risk well we have ever drilled. However, the pros of that argument, of course, we get into cash flow very quickly. The cons are that we might be able to site a well, perhaps technically in a superior position with the aid of 3D.
Well, it must be tempting. $40,000 a day is going to flow out of the hole you've got. So,
something like that.
You could add another hole and make it a nice round 100, couldn't you? I mean, it's a...
Absolutely. Those are the pros. There are some negatives, but that's a subject of hot debate at board level, and it really is a board decision. So the jury's still out.
So, yeah, what do you think the market would like to see? It'd be nice to see production. I mean, it's pretty exciting news to,
markets are always focused on production, let's face it. I mean, it's difficult to raise money to do seismic. People don't find seismic very exciting. We know as geoscientists, though, that seismic is necessary as a precursor to drilling wells. However, in this particular case, as I said, there are pros and cons. Obviously, the market wants us to drill another well as soon as possible. There are some technical arguments, though, in favour of pausing and doing a 3D seismic program first. That is still being reviewed by the board. One thing for sure, though, we must run an extended production test as soon as possible on the surprise well.
Okay, so extended production test, you obviously, it's a valuable product, so you're going to be able to truck it. The site's roughly 500 kilometres to the west of Alice Springs.
That's correct.
So it's not exactly over-endowed with infrastructure, but it's sufficiently at $123 a barrel.
Sure.
You can truck that just about anywhere, can't you?
Well, look, there are several destinations for us to truck the oil to.
All right.
We are in discussion with several potential buyers. One is the Inland Oil Refinery Group at Eromanga, where they operate a small refinery. The other one is Santos, who operate a refinery, or rather export facilities at Port Bonython.
It needs to be refined. You can't run engines with it just straight. I mean, it's a light grade of oil.
Historical anecdote says that with similar oil at Mereenie, which is about 200 kilometres to the east, the operators there have used that oil once they've degassed the oil to run into trucks and various pumping equipment.
Wow. So straight out of the ground and into a truck?
Pretty much, with some pretty good filtering and a bit of heat treatment to get rid of any entrained gas.
And if you did treat it, how much diesel would you get out of it? What proportion?
Look, We don't have any plans to market this as a crude oil that can be used in trucks or diesel engines straight away. We want to sell the oil to a refiner,
Yeah, that's why I'm just
who will then
playing-
refine the oil. And we don't have enough information to say, but typically an oil like this would probably produce about 60% of the total volume would be converted into diesel or some other middle distillate product such as jet fuel, for example.
Right, which of course in Central Australia there's a lot of fuel. I mean, it's not a huge market, but certainly the fuel at the moment is travelling a long way to get into Central Australia.
Oh sure, yeah, the diesel in Central Australia is used by the transport industry, that is trucks, four-wheel drives, trains use diesel of course, and also there's a lot of mining activity in the Northern Territory. A lot of that mining activity is restricted to the use of diesel for generation and for power and equipment.
And you can get there by trucking to the Ghan and going up on the Ghan rail line? Or?
Well, look, we think we can truck oil all the way north as far as Port Darwin for probably $20 to $25 a barrel.
Goodness me.
Now, if you're selling oil at Tapas benchmark prices of $120 plus, for argument's sake, that still gives you $100 a barrel margin over your transport costs approximately.
So this is an economical trial production?
Well, it is.
I mean, it's going to be economic even in trial production.
Excluding the cost of the well, of course, yes, the extended production test should be quite a good money spinner for the company. One of the advantages of running an extended production test is you don't have to pay royalties to the government. Technically, we don't have to pay royalties to the Central Land Council either, but we are planning some form of payments to them. You can't operate a big company, relatively big company like ours in Central Australia and not support the local traditional owners.
Okay. Well, we've played with the idea of making money out of trial production with an existing hole, which is you know, a very exciting place to be starting a fresh field.
Sure.
Other players, I see quite a few players up around the region. There must be a lot of attention coming from them. And what's the upside here? This could be a major find, new province. I mean, is the sky the limit?
There's a lot of blue sky up there. I mean, over the whole acreage spread, of course, we've got independently certified prospective recoverables of 5 billion barrels of oil and about 40 TCF of gas. But in the immediate surprise area, there's a huge amount of upside. We're dealing with roughly 1,000 square kilometres immediately surrounding the surprise discovery, where we know already there's about another half a dozen leads and plays for examination. There's room for a lot more seismic there, and I'm quite confident that more seismic will show up even more leads and structures for us to pay attention to.
Right, so the 3D survey might actually sort of also start to reach out. I mean, is that an expensive to do that? Would you do the whole of that tenement area?
No, we wouldn't do the whole of that tenement area. I think ultimately we'll be working towards doing regional surveys over the main oil kitchen areas and the immediate surrounds with 2D. But wherever we've got signs of a pretty good closure or stratigraphic trap on 2D, of course, we will probably do some follow-up 3D over that area.
Is that necessary for declaring a stock exchange resource, the 3D?
No, I think with a couple of 2 or 3 producing wells, for example, we can do some very significant reservoir engineering studies on that, particularly if we drill down deep enough to get into the oil-water contact, so we know then what the lowest closing contour of the surprise structure is. But we do see a mixture of additional drilling and 3D seismic is the best combination. 3D seismic gives you much more structural detail. It enables you to map the closure area much more accurately. But what 3D seismic will not tell you is where the oil-water contact is. So drilling into the oil-water contact has to be a part of the process towards the establishment of contingent resources and ultimately, of course, reserves.
So, John, the wells don't come cheap. How much did the surprise well cost?
Look, the surprise well was quite an aberrant process because we basically lost most of the money that we paid on the first well. We had to re-enter drill-through plugs, drill a vertical well and then pull back up and drill the horizontal well. The first well was budgeted at about $8 million. The second well was budgeted because of the horizontal section at round about 9 or 10. Now the numbers are still coming in. We think we've come in slightly under budget on round about a $10 million well cost, including the horizontal section. I'd like to add that the horizontal section would have been much longer. We originally planned up to 700 metres.
Oh, wow.
But we had some problems with hole instability in the angle build section, that is the curved section of the well, which dictated the stopping of drilling, and we had to sleeve off that section with some production pipes, so we were prevented.
So very expensive shot. What's the market cap?
Market cap of the company today is about $70 million.
Okay, 70. So you've got to raise about 10% of that for each shot. I mean,
That's true. That's fairly typical, though, of a small oil production company. Now, we have raised all of our capital ourselves, basically, apart from a few minor farm-in partners that we have. What we hope to do now is to dramatically intensify discussions and consultations with potential farm-in partners so that we can farm out large chunks of that acreage and have some free carry on initial exploration. So that means then we hope to replace the dilution of the shareholders up to date with each successive capital raising by production and by farm-in partners carrying a lot of the burden.
I mean, obviously with a discovery like this, you must be making some headlines around the place, and so you're thinking bring partners in at a project level, not on an equity level. I mean, it seems to me if I was a big petroleum company and I wanted to be in the race, I'd be buying up on your share register for a start, wouldn't I?
Well, not necessarily. Big oil companies have a different philosophy. You'll find the smaller, more aggressive, more entrepreneurial companies might consider such an approach. Right. But big oil generally likes to spend the money on the ground.
Okay, so
They're not interested in who owns the ground as long as they've got a deal to spend it on the ground.
So who else is, who are the other players who I mean, you've got most of this basinal structure, sub-basin. Who are the other players, and are they all watching? Is that
I'm sure they're watching. I'm sure they're watching. Santos, for example, owns the Mereenie oil field, which is still in production 200 kilometres to the east. Magellan owns the Palm Valley gas field about 300 kilometres to the east. Petro Frontier own acreage in the southern Georgina next door to us. And we have a couple of other smaller unlisted companies in the general district. Further north we have companies like Hess farming into the Beetaloo Basin acreage. Further to the southeast we have companies like BG farming into Drill Search's acreage, which has recently hit the headlines in a big way. And of course we have Beach Energy that have released contingent resources of 2 trillion cubic feet of gas from an unconventional shale gas resource in the Cooper Basin. Further to the northwest we have New State Energy being farmed into by ConocoPhillips, Mitsubishi farming into Buru's ground.
So it kind of sounds to me like it's
things are heating up.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. So. We've seen the imputed value per acre of farm out deals in Australia for unconventional resources rise from over a range of $10 an acre to as high as $300 to $500 an acre with the most recent deals that have come through. Although we are the only people in Australia so far to have produced oil from a horizontal well, at least as far as I know, and I've not been challenged on that statement yet.
Well, we're obviously coming up for a very exciting time with Central Petroleum, and you must be feeling deeply rewarded for a lot of tenacity and flies and hanging on a lot of years and small oil prices. Project's obviously got a lot of national significance.
Sure, absolutely. There's a lot of energy stored in the ground in Central Australia. We've talked about the oil and gas resources. We also have a dominant position in a whole Permian coal basin, the Perdika Basin. We have 2 other areas that we believe are highly prospective for oil. That is the eastern side of the Perdika Basin and the southern side of the Georgina Basin. So logically our 3 main focus areas will be the western Amadeus around the Surprise area in EP 115, the eastern part of the Perdika where we have quite a few very large oil prospects, including an interpreted Devonian reef, which could be of major significance. And of course we've got about 6 million acres in the southern Georgina. And production news to pull it all together. Absolutely.
John, thank you very much for coming in tonight, and may the good ship Central Petroleum be in our headlines in the coming months.
Thank you very much, Julian.